Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast, Season 2, Episode 5. I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham, Executive Director for the Michigan Brewers Guild. We're storming into 2021. Here we are, Scott. It's Episode 5. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Fred. Good to see you. Yeah, it's the calendar, at least when we're recording this, is March. And for those of you who know, I live in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, and the maple sap is flowing, and I'm looking forward to replenishing the syrup supply and weather turning nice, and hopefully us, the vaccine getting more widely distributed, helping to, continue to push that curve of COVID infection and sickness down, and hopefully we can get back to a schedule of some beer festivals.
Yeah, spring brings hope in a regular year, and I think this year it's much needed and starting to peek through, although not for the Spring Beer Festival, but hopefully for the rest of the year. So the Guild recently announced the cancellation of the Spring Festival, which is a challenge, the festival that hasn't been yet, but it's been on the books twice. But other than that, you've been able to make some brewery visits, and it's encouraging to see people being able to welcome guests in a still challenged but more engaging way than we have for several months.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording that I have been out to a couple breweries. We still have new members joining the Guild and breweries opening, and it's just so refreshing. I mean, every time I go meet a new brewery and have a beer there, it just reminds me why people love the culture and like going to breweries, and why it doesn't get old, because it's fun. And the biggest thing that the people involved in this whole community, in all aspects, there's so many great people and enjoyable people to be around, and it just reminds me of why that's important to our lives and why that brings quality of life. And now that it's coming out of my mouth, it makes me go, I'm not the most social person, but I'm certainly not about social distancing, and we've been having to physical distance. I don't even like to say social distancing, but I've really enjoyed being maybe physically a little distant, but doing some more socializing recently. It's very refreshing, and it does feel like spring. Not to mention, I left home where it's cold and there's still snow, and I was in Lansing. I actually visited Sleepwalker in Rio Town, which was a really fun place. I'll just throw that out there. And it was almost 60 degrees. I'm going, geez, I think I need to strip down to the t-shirt here and put on some shoes that aren't so warm. So yeah, I'm enjoying the hint of spring, even though I still expect some snow and cold weather.
Yep, I've been. Sometimes I call it the first mud before second winter, and it's cooled back down here, and that further south. We had a nice couple days. Got more ahead, but there's optimism ahead. You want to also share a little bit about the golf outings that have been scheduled in place of some of the more traditional things?
Yeah, as an effort to kind of take a fresh look and try and raise some funds in the absence of having our festivals, we introduced a schedule of 3 golf outings for the course of this year. The first one's coming up in in June on June 11th, if I'm not making a mistake there. So yeah, and we're going. This is new territory for us. They're very much intended to be traditional fundraiser type golf outings, but the golf isn't going to be too serious. It's going to be fun. We encourage people to get involved. We're just starting to really work on sponsorship. So if somebody's catching this in close to real time, we did just get our registration open on our website, which is at mibeer.com. You can go to events and find it, or find a button right on the homepage. So if anybody wants to share that or is interested, you can find more information there. I think these are going to be, fun little different events for us this year, and who knows, hopefully we'll find some success and continue with it into the future too.
Yeah, and just to update, you've got June 9th, August 11th, and October 9th.
Thank you.
That is on the homepage and ready to go. So with that, anything else you want to share out there to the beer loving public or members prior to getting into the Brewers Dozen?
No, I don't think so. I feel like I've been blathering on enough already.
All right. Well, why don't you kick us off with this week's Brewers Dozen?
Yeah, so every week, in an effort to try and highlight as many members as we can without overdoing it, we have this Brewers Dozen, and we've been going through regional clusters of breweries. And this week is focused really on Detroit itself, and then stretching just a little bit beyond Detroit to Dearborn and Grosse Pointe Park. But let's start off with Atwater, Detroit Tap House and Brewery, which is what we all know as Atwater Brewery, right in Detroit.
Yeah, the original. Granite City Food and Brewery nearby in Detroit.
Yeah, of course, Brew Detroit is one of our more interesting operations, and that's in the Corktown neighborhood of Detroit.
And Detroit Beer Company.
Longtime member, early Detroit brewery, and Founders Brewing Company is also in Detroit, an extension of the Founders operation. It's their Detroit tap room. They've got a nice brewery there and a cool place.
Yeah, and another remarkable historic location is Eastern Market Brewing Company.
Yes, and then another offshoot or additional location is Jolly Pumpkin, Detroit.
And then a couple of historic players coming up. You've got Traffic Jam and Snug.
And then Motor City Brewing Works, and those three breweries, Jolly Pumpkin, Detroit, Traffic Jam, and Snug in Motor City, are all, you can easily walk to those from one to the other to the other.
That's right. That's right. And John Leonardo's episode from season 1 does a good job of explaining the history of that corner in Detroit Mackinac. Pretty cool storytelling there. So look for Leonardo's episode on that one. And then you've got over in Dearborn, we've got Downey Brewing Company.
And Dearborn Brewing, the two breweries that we've got in Dearborn.
And then heading over to Grosse Pointe Park, we've got Atwater in the park.
And that wraps up our Brewers Dozen for episode 5, season 2.
Yeah. So that leaves us to introduce our guest for this episode. This is an interview that's from the Rising Tide Book Project, where we talked to about 35 different personalities in the brewing scene in 2018. This is Chris Andrus from the Mitten Brewing Company. We talked to him in Grand Rapids, and I thought it was a really engaging interview. I enjoyed hearing the story. I think for me, it's not the first person by a long shot that we've talked to that kind of came in the middle of what we know as the timeline of the Michigan brewing scene. But there was something about it that hearing Chris's perspective gave me insight into a perspective different than my own, from a timeline point of view and from an approach point of view. And I really felt like I could hear what it was like to enter the scene in a different way than I knew of without hearing from him. So if that made any sense at all, I just thought it was refreshing in a way to see the guild through a different set of eyes, a different lens.
One of the things I really like about Chris and his partner Max's story with the Mitten Brewing Company is how they, I guess, have reshaped or changed part of the history and trajectory of the neighborhood that they're in. And there are a lot of stories like this, but theirs is a great one where they intentionally went into an area that might not be thought of as a good place to open a business like this. And it has helped revitalize it, changed the character, brought something to the community there, and other businesses have grown around it. So it's really a cool story.
Yeah, and you said the word. It's really one of the remarkable things about it is the intentionality of it, and not just businesses, but it brought local makers in the craft beverage scene and the food and beverage scene, and so they're very community minded. And I thought Chris lent a great voice to that sort of perspective. So it's a couple years now, but I think it was also an interesting foreshadowing, I think, of what gave them some of the resilience and strength as a business that so many of our members and businesses are counting on to get through these difficult times. But so I thought that was interesting too, hearing this sort of business philosophy prior to one of the most challenging era we've all experienced probably. So with that, I think I can hand it off to Chris. We're going back to 2018 in Grand Rapids, Michigan on the west side, talking to Chris Andrus of Mitten Brewing Company. Here's Chris.
Cheers to the Mitten.
Welcome. Thanks for joining. We're kind of telling stories about various brewery origins and kind of the arc of our brewing community here in Michigan. So I'd love to hear kind of how you got interested in brewing and how how your company came to existence and how you joined this community brewing.
Sure. Well, I would say we're probably an outlier in a lot of respects in the brewing community because myself and my partner Max, we never brewed a beer until we were 30 years old. We kind of came to the hobby late and opened when we were both 32 years old. So before that, I'd been a professional singer-songwriter, and my partner had been a marketing professional, but neither of us really, I guess, had any business opening a brewery restaurant, but we were confident we could figure it out.
And in 2 years, so from brewing to opening your 2 years, what lit the spark and what did the first activity look like?
Sure. So we were both, I'd given music everything I could give it, and Max was ready to make a change. So we went to school with the Siciliano family who owned the homebrew shop in town, and we had just started getting into craft beer, and by that I mean Oberon and all those gateway beers. And then we really went crazy with it. We started homebrewing every week, and it became all encompassing. We started buying textbooks. We started buying everything. We leapfrogged all the beginner stuff, went right to the really difficult textbooks because we wanted to go pro. And
so before you started homebrewing at all, was the idea let's open a brewery, or was it let's learn to homebrew?
The first batch we brewed, we had the idea to open a brewery someday.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I'm sure that's not uncommon, but
you're on the accelerated path. Let's figure this shit out.
I'm not a patient man.
Let's get into the pros.
For sure. And we wanted to do it together, and we wanted to own it.
Uh-huh. And what year was that first brew?
2010.
Gotcha. So that's the idea phase when you start making beer. What were you guys sharing between batches in terms of was it encouragement? Was it excitement? Was there any anxiety?
I definitely had anxiety. We brewed pale ale over and over again. A lot of people do it to have fun and have some beers and relax, and that was not us. Yeah. We were fanatical about it. We were trying to learn fundamentals, and
you were woodshedding.
Yeah, exactly. We
basically
had
in rehearsal
pH meters right off the bat. We were pushing the limits of what we knew we were trying to stay we're trying to bite off a little bit more than we know we could chew to get better in a hurry.
Yeah. And so at 2010, there's already somewhat of a robust community here in Michigan. How did that inform you or inspire you or challenge you with your idea to open a business?
Our biggest fear in 2010 was that it was already too late. We had thought that, there's such a bustling scene already, and we had no idea what it would become 8 years later. But we were afraid that we might have missed our chance to do it, since we knew we were going to open. It was going to take a few years to raise the money and be in a position where we felt comfortable with our own skill level to open. But looking back, I realized we were probably in the first or second inning of the development of the beer scene here in Michigan. So we got it at exactly the right time, in my opinion. There was a unquenchable thirst for Michigan beer, and we were buoyed up by that in a lot of respects, because our beer wasn't up to the snuff that it should have been when we came out, but there was such enthusiasm that we got away with it. Mm-hmm. And I have the Michigan beer community to thank for that adjustment period. We're able to grow into the company we are today because people were patient with us, and there was so much enthusiasm for Michigan beer.
And did you find that patience to be customers, employees, other breweries, industry members, or was there one group? How did that look to the different groups, I guess?
Sure. Well, the customers by and large were very patient with us, especially since we had a 3-barrel system in an old fire barn, and we were full every night. So we went down to 1 or 2 beers more than a few times. And I used to stand out at the front door and apologize and just warn everybody, hey, all we have on tonight is a brown ale. So learned to
Bear
love
with
it.
us.
Yeah, and they did. But after a year...
And just to make sure I'm on track, what year did you open? Did Mitten
We
Brewing
opened
open?
in October 2012.
Gotcha. So that's the 2010 to 2012 were those 2 years of trial by fire and get ready.
And the staff, we were fortunate with the staff as well, because navigating a startup is difficult for everyone involved. And the staff, you're basically expecting them to share a lot of the ownership burden and take the lumps along the way with none of the ownership reward. So we knew it was challenging for
There's
the staff.
reward?
There better be. So it was. We knew we had to be better for them. So Max and I are very much of the servant leadership mindset. We wanted to make sure we were in the trenches along with them, doing the grungy work and trying to make their lives better on a daily basis, because it was harder than walking into a well-established machine.
Yeah. And how did you feel? What was your relationship like with other breweries or with the community in terms of, were you inspired by some of the examples ahead of you? Were you talking to them at all? What was your relationship with other breweries at that point?
Sure. Well, we were fans of the other breweries, and obviously from Founders and Brassworks building, that was where we cut our teeth learning about craft beer for the most part. And my partner Max is very social and loves to talk, and he's not afraid to talk to anybody. So we needed some hops we couldn't get otherwise in year one. And he says, well, I'll just call Jeremy at Founders. And I was like, are you crazy? You can't just call Jeremy. Called him, got those hops that day. Mm-hmm. So Jeremy and the Founders team totally took us under their wing and gave us advice and unsolicited help. And we were blown away by just how welcoming the scene was. And I've talked to other breweries from Colorado and San Diego and these things, and that's not the case there. The Michigan scene is really the envy of other big brewing scenes because it's so collaborative, and it's not something that you see in a nationwide level.
Do you have any sense of how or why that came to be in Michigan compared to places where it didn't?
I really don't. I mean, other than the fact that it may be because it is so new and then the wind is at everyone's backs for the most part. Even though it is getting more competitive and you're starting to see some places shutter, it's still doing very well overall. And I think it raises the bar of quality for everybody. So if there's an IPA in every corner, you got to have the best IPA. Yeah. It's no longer just, hey, I'm here, I have an offering.
Right.
Patronize me.
Do you think that it's different for breweries opening now than it was in, like you had your concern of am I too late? And there may be other breweries asking themselves that today in 2018.
Well,
what do you think things look like for them and what's important for them?
I think the era of a schlub like me opening a brewery and learning and figuring it out on the fly, it might be over, because most of the places opening now are great right out of the gate, and they've got experienced brewmasters, or they're owned by people who brewed professionally for decades. And I'm not sure we'd get that same long leash now if we opened. So we're grateful for the time period and the culture into which we were born, because it may not come around again.
So how would you frame that in terms of what do you think's required of a brewery to open and contribute to the market today?
I would say that a brewery opening now has to focus everything on differentiation and making sure they're meeting a need that's not being met. And Max and I were very conscious of that. We knew we weren't going to have as much money as anybody. That's why we set our sights to the west side. And when we opened, we were the first brewery since Prohibition to open. And a lot of our investors second-guessed that decision. Because if you looked at the demographics and the median income, it does not scream $5 pints.
Right.
And but we had known nationwide. We traveled around and had studied other breweries that revitalized, industrialized, downtrodden areas and destination. Yeah. They were destinations, and we wanted to be a destination as well.
It's essentially the brewery story, the craft brewer story in so many locales, but it always has included a risk that wasn't necessarily, it didn't look good to the banking community. It's never looked good to the banking community until it looked good to the banking community.
Well, and I wasn't a man of any means. And when I went to the banks in 2011 and asked for money to start a brewery, and I had a really good business plan, but it was 2 years after the housing collapse of 2008, 2009, and they weren't lending money to anybody, much less guys like me.
Yeah.
So we had to, be creative and snowball our friends and family and get some momentum before we could do that. But while we were doing that, planning and being creative about fundraising, we knew that we had to be different, because we weren't going to have the equipment, startup, any of that stuff that most people had. We knew we were going to be fermenting in non-jacketed plastic tanks for the first couple months until we could afford our first stainless tank. Yeah. And we limped along like that, and it seems so far gone now that we've got this amazing cellar and all these things, but it's because we grinded through those tough times. And every time we'd retire one of these plastic tanks, Max and I would be like, for one tank closer to being a real brewery. And we made miracles happen with those tanks, but it's a reality that not everyone can afford the shiny, impressive cellar off the bat.
So what's your earliest memory of engaging with the Michigan Brewers Guild? Either being aware of it, or I should ask that before engaging, do you recall kind of your first awareness of the Brewers Guild as an organization?
Winter Beer Fest 2012 was my first real understanding of the Brewers Guild and what they did, and that was the first beer fest I'd ever been to. That was before we opened, but in the same year. And I was floored by that festival. Yeah, it was so well put together, and we met, board members from the guild. I'd known, seen them in breweries around, and then I finally got an understanding that there's a governing board. There's this event, and it was spoiled because that was my first event. That's still my favorite event because it's so unique, it's so different, and so well run. But that was my first real introduction to the guild.
And what was that like coming back to work, coming back home? I guess you had a short car ride, but I mean, sure. What did you take away after you got back to the brewery?
My main takeaway from that first Guild Fest was, holy shit, we've got to get better. We've got to be up to par when we open, because this is the best thing I've ever seen. These are the best beers I've ever had. Yeah. And I started to feel really insecure, which is good for me, because that's how I
inspiration with haltingly aware insecurity.
Yeah, and I'm like,
your musician roots are showing.
Yeah, like a comedian that goes out and bombs, they're not going to be okay until they go out there and kill. Yeah, they're going to go back, study what they did, and they're not going to be fine until they're better. Yeah.
So as you got open and continued on your path, what did your overlap or your engagement or activity with the guild look like?
Well, most of our early involvement with the guild was struggling desperately to get beer for events. Mm-hmm. We knew that most of the lobbying efforts in Lansing and stuff we didn't pay that much attention to, because we were so far, we were so small. None of it. We hadn't distributed a drop. We didn't have, most of our focus in the early years was trying to keep our head above water. Mm-hmm. But I remember we wanted to be a part of these guild events, and we just couldn't spare the kegs. So I just always remember being, how many kegs are going out to this festival? Oh, we can't afford to spare 3. Yeah, seems like a long time ago.
And how has that changed into current?
Now we've reinvested millions into our brew house and our cellar, and we have this pretty much an event of some kind every weekend that we're able to fulfill. And obviously we prioritize the guild events, and we always have, because they're the best.
You guys attend the conference as well?
The
winter conference in Kalamazoo?
Yes, usually we would send Wob or Jason would go.
Gotcha.
Yep. So we're really now it's calmed down quite a bit for Max and I. We're starting to get more involved in guild things and legislation efforts and that sort of stuff, because we both had children right when we were opening too. And we both had kids under 5 until this year, and it's been a hazy blur.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you talked about revitalization, and I think as a community, that's something that we've seen in just about any area. There's a brewery. There's been some sort of revitalization of that neighborhood and community. And so when we look at, for this purposes, when you look at our collection of Michigan breweries, can you talk a little bit about what a healthy brewing community or what a healthy brewery can mean to their community?
Well, when we opened our place, so we located in a 127-year-old fire engine house, brick engine house, that had been dilapidated and fallen by the wayside. It was a historic landmark, but it was pretty rough inside. So when we opened up on that block that we're on right now, it was pretty much the only thing happening. And we had hoped maybe 3 to 5 years from now, hopefully maybe some other things will come in around us and clean up the block a little. Well, it happened within 1 year, because we planted that flag there early. We made the investment, and our Mug Club members, number 3 and 4, opened Long Road Distillers across the street. Our ex-chef opened Two Scott's Barbecue, kitty corner to us. Yeah. And all of a sudden, this corner has this, it was abandoned buildings with broken windows. Now it's this totally revitalized, craft-centric neighborhood.
Yeah.
And People's Cider Company comes in next door to Long Road last year. And it continues to grow. Now there's a comedy club going in next door to that, and it's snowballing, and it's great to see. And it's great because it's not gentrified. It's not big money coming in. These are native organizations built by people who lived here their whole lives. And it's great to see.
And what are some of those, I feel like you know it instinctively, but what are some extenuating benefits for the community that those thriving businesses bring?
Sure.
Especially when you talk about the difference between, big outstate money coming in versus independent local businesses. How does that bear to being to the residents of that community?
Sure. Well, I'll use us as an example. We're very much in a neighborhood. There's a house at the back end of our parking lot, and so on, all down the street. And something that meant a lot to Max and I in our earliest business plan was we want to make sure there's a charitable component in our business plan, in our operation for the neighborhood, because we're going to be in the neighborhood. It's going to be, in some respects, a burden to the neighborhood with the traffic and everything like that. So if we've donated more than $200,000 to neighborhood causes since we opened, and none of which would have happened had we not been there. But our success is a function of our neighbors. It's a function of they look to us as a steward of their money, and we're fortunate that they choose to spend it with us. And we don't look at it as some sort of craven strategy. It's our duty to give it back. It's our responsibility. And the pleasant byproduct is we've been able to engage a lot of other people, a lot of other businesses in our mission in that respect. So ideally, do the work to make it, a ton of work to make it effortless eventually.
Yeah.
And we've seen that a lot. We've seen a lot of snowballing of our efforts.
I think if you can step outside the economics and sort of business aspect, what's important about having flavorful, independently made food and drink in a community? Because that's kind of all these area businesses we're talking about end up bringing something different to the community to eat and drink, and is that culturally significant? Is it more of a how does it relate, the difference between a successful independent business and a deeper, wider cultural offering?
Sure. Well, I mean, in many respects, we're a product of our surroundings, and I feel fortunate that we struck a need and a nerve, and we'd hoped that we would, but you're never really sure until you fling open the doors and let everybody in. But time and time again, we talk to neighbors and lifelong West Siders who tell us how much they needed something like this. Mm-hmm. Because there's a million places, there's a million bars, neighborhood bars, to get Bud Light and chicken wings. And, you know, it's not that our offering is drastically different than that, but it's something they can put ownership on. This is an outgrowth of myself and my community and my neighborhood. And they've got names that mean something. They got names about, the beer name is named after a fireman who lived in this house down the street. You know, it's very much a product it's an outgrowth of its surroundings. And I feel like the West Side has embraced us and taken pride in that. And the West Siders are this unique tribe of people. You know, it's very blue collar. There's a lot of old, you know, third, fourth generation immigrant families, and it's very ethnic and very diverse. And, you know, it was daunting to try to figure out a way to please everybody, but we came in there, we were ourselves, and they supported it.
Yeah. And what has it been like about for you to develop your team and employees? And so now there's more people brewing than you guys, and now you have more than one location, and so you've been fostering opportunities and growth for some longtime employees like Wob.
Yep.
What's that path been like for you, and what are some of the surprises you've come across along the way?
Well, the biggest point of pride for myself and Max is the fact that we employ more than 100 people. And we make, you know, I know my job every day is to come in and do the best job I can, because 100 families count on it. Count on me doing that for them. We started with 13 people. I never imagined going beyond 20. I'm very grateful. It's a lot of payroll to make every 2 weeks. But, you know, I love it. It's the most rewarding part when I find out that people who work for us are friends, now they're roommates, they're dating, they're getting married. It's their own little microcosm that we've created. Yeah. But it's important for me to feel that responsibility, and when we open our other locations, to employ locals, to make sure that it's not, it's an extension of what we do, but it's also very native and very supportive of those communities and its residents, and providing a job, providing a living for my family. These are the things that get me through the tough times, because like any other business, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of dark days and long days.
Yeah. Do you feel that those team members, you know, I'm thinking kind of in the brew house, but I think it goes beyond that. Do you think they benefit from a sense of camaraderie and community in similar businesses in terms of brewery, distillery, winery, cidery?
Sure.
Is that fabric, the fact that Michigan seems to be a fertile ground with lots of people making up that employee base, do you find your employees are being encouraged and educated by that sort of networking?
Yeah, I mean, you can bus tables and wash dishes and wait on people anywhere, for anybody. But there's a reason that people stay in the brewery industry. There's a reason that we retain employees at 3 times the national average, because we offer more. There's community involvement. There's more than just the job description. There's intangibles that we provide that the brewery world as a whole provides. There's a camaraderie, like you said. Brewers they're a unique breed, and you know, everyone finds their place eventually, and people kind of hop around a little bit. Brewers hop around within the Michigan scene, but it's rarely ever a problem. Yeah. Because, you know, after 3 or 4 years, you might want to try something else. So, I mean, we've had brewers leave, brewers come in from other places, and usually over a handshake and a beer with the other brewery owner, it's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we succeed because we offer more. And that's not just a customer offering thing. We offer our employees more, you know, benefits that go beyond facile financial things. It's belonging to a tribe. It's knowing that I'm waiting tables, or I'm cooking in the kitchen, but children are getting uniforms in school that can't afford them because of my efforts.
Yeah. So as you look forward, what do you find inspiring, or where do you draw energy and inspiration from to look ahead to next year, or however far you look ahead?
I think what's ahead for us and for everyone else is to focus on being great and not big. I feel like the chance to be a huge nationwide brewery gets smaller by the day. There's enough neighborhood pubs, there's enough, the need is being met by all these new startups. The amount of breweries has more than doubled since we started nationwide. So I think that's great. I think it clarifies everyone's vision to be great, to be good, to do things and not worry about growth and overbuilding and these kind of things. It's tempting to want to, get your product everywhere, but I just don't think that that's how the land is going to lay for people starting today. There's only so much shelf space, and you need to take care of your own and take care of your neighborhood and your employees and focus on being great.
Anything you hope for that's Michigan specific? What do you hope for this community of drinkers, community of human beings, or brewery operators?
Well, trademark infringement is becoming a major issue, and my hope is that this industry that was built on camaraderie and espousing small business tactics and not big business ones, my hope is that it maintains that identity and doesn't lose it to chasing bigger margins and that sort of thing. The industry has been defined by its counterculture roots, and I hope that it can grow and weather change well without becoming what it's set out to destroy.
Yeah, awesome, man. I love it. Thanks for your efforts, and thanks for what you do for the community and for sitting down with us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997, with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.
Let's drink